Our youth deserves better.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. And of course, this podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day, every NBA team, every NFL team covered. And what better way to find out the most information about your team than by subscribing to those podcasts and listening to them, of course, along with this one. My name is Josh Lloyd, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball, on Instagram at the same, and on Patreon the same, patreon.com/redrock_bball. You can always watch these shows live on Facebook at facebook.com/redrockbasketball as well. What we're going to do in today's show, I know I said that the next show would be the Western Conference potential breakout players, but the NBA schedule has been released in the interim, so we're going to do a schedule analysis show for today, and then at the end of the week, we'll be doing a Western Conference breakout players to complement the Eastern Conference breakout players that we had at the beginning of the week. So
let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. Just a quick note, if you do want to go check out our full schedule grid, it is up over at basketballmonster.com. Our memberships will be open in the next week or two. As I said, I've done projections for every player. I've gone through them 2-3 times. I'm going to go through them probably 4 or 5 times before they're released, but they'll be coming pretty soon. So that membership will be open in the coming weeks. So it won't be too far away. But at the moment, you can check out the schedule grid that we've got up there. Now, a lot of people really focus on the schedule, and if you've listened to me on this podcast before, you know that I tend to brush it aside a little bit. And there's a bit of nuance to that. Schedule is important. We know that it's important for fantasy. It's very important for head-to-head leagues. We know that. What the NBA has done this year, they have reduced the amount of back-to-backs on average about 2 or 3 per team. So hopefully that's going to reduce the amount of resting, and also the commissioner's focus on resting. We're not going to have as much resting during the season. It's still going to be a real pain in the ass in April, and that's why your season should never extend into those last 2.5 weeks of the year. Should never go that far. So you can forget about, just don't do it. Just don't get your season to go that far. It's bullshit. I'm still debating, I guess, what I'm going to do with the Red Rock Listener Leagues. Do I end them on April the 1st? Which is, I think, maybe pushing it a little bit too far, or do I go a week back to March 25th? I think I might actually do March 25th, just so we can eliminate as much bullshit as possible. Now, there are going to be teams that come in and completely screw that, like the Suns and their hatchet job last year, like the Lakers and what they did. The Lakers not so much because no one gave a shit about Mozgov or Deng, but the Suns shutting down Bledsoe was a real disgusting move, I thought, and even Brandon Knight to a degree. And there's really no way to avoid that. So that's all part of it. Now back to schedule. When I say that schedule doesn't matter, it's not a blanket statement, because it obviously does matter. But making significant drafting decisions based on playoff schedules as a general rule is not right. What you need to do is you need to use it as a factor, as a tiebreaker. And even then, only for the top level players, only for the first 40, 50 players perhaps, the top 3-4 rounds maybe. When you get to the bottom of the league, it doesn't matter, because, and I'll tell you why it doesn't matter. Player trades can happen. Player roles change significantly for those guys at the end of drafts. You will find that through the course of the season, your bottom third of your roster, 5 guys at the bottom of your roster, 4 guys at the bottom of your roster, they won't be there by the end of the season. 6 guys might not be there. So the guy that you drafted with your 12th pick, that you took it, you know what, he's got a 4-4-4 playoff schedule, so yeah, but better get him. The guy that you jumped 3 rounds ahead to grab when you could have grabbed him 3 rounds later because of his playoff schedule, odds are he's not going to be on your team. Now, when we get through to the All-Star break and when we start pushing up towards the playoffs and we can get a better idea of what teams are doing and trades and injuries and all those sort of things, then consolidating teams for your playoffs is a smart thing to do. Making moves 3 days before a week starts during the season, preparing for the week ahead, to look at your schedule, to maximize your games played that week is absolutely crucial. But making drafting decisions on guys who 75% of the time aren't going to remain on your team based on the fact that they get 2 extra playoff games, forget the fact that you need to get to the playoffs first. That person needs to be on the team. That person needs to be healthy. That person needs to be in the rotation. It's an asinine decision. Now, at the top of the draft, that can have an impact. Of course, again, you do need to get to the playoffs first. That's why it should not be a primary consideration of making your decisions of, this guy's got a great playoff schedule, have to draft him. Because everybody plays or has the ability to play 82 games. And that means if they play 3 more games across a playoff week, they play 3 less games somewhere else. And those 3 less games they play somewhere else, it could be the difference between you finishing 4th or 5th. It probably won't be, but it could be. So that's another thing you need to weigh up. You need to get there first. Stacking up your team full of players who play 11 games or 12 games throughout the playoffs, it's no good if you don't get there. So the top of the draft, first round, second round, third round, use it as a factor, no doubt. Don't let it trump, didn't want to say that word. Don't let it go over ability. Don't let it go over team fit. Don't let it go over, injuries. Or it should be a factor, but it's a minimal factor for those, and it becomes a bigger factor as we approach it, as we get closer to it during the season. As you're setting up each weekly matchup, it becomes a factor. But it should not be an overriding factor. And once you get outside the top 50, it means nothing, and you should pay zero attention to it. You pay attention to it when you get to February and you go, you know what, I'm probably going to be in the playoffs here. Let me load up on my Toronto Raptors as they have 3-4 game weeks in a row. And we'll talk about all that in a second. That makes a little bit of sense. And you'll be able to judge all this through Basketball Monster and see what sort of impact playing 12 games has over playing 10 games. Because for some players, playing 10 games will be more impactful than playing 12 games. And the other thing you need to remember is that, and thankfully we don't have that this season of teams playing 5 games in a week, but over the past couple of years, people have been falling over, I need to get the Clippers, I need to get Nets players, I need to get Bulls players because they've got a 5-game week in the playoffs. And every single time that happened, the players didn't play 5 games. They played 4 games. They played 3 games. It never happened. It never went down. And yes, their ceiling is they can play 5 games, but they never do. And someone who's got a 4-game week cannot play 5 games, but they still end up playing the same. But we're not in that situation this year. We don't have 5-game weeks throughout the playoffs, which is a good thing, I think, for us not to have 5-game weeks. I want to talk about the start of the season, because often we can look at your last pick in the draft as like a waiver wire selection for week 1 and trying to get a decent amount of games in for those first couple of weeks, get yourself off to a good start. That's a decent strategy. I don't mind that. We don't have any teams playing. The first week we've got every team playing either 3 or 2 games, so not a big discrepancy. The second week we've got every team playing 4 or 3 games. So again, we don't have any 2s or 5s. In that first week, we don't have any 4s or 1s. So it is pretty close. But what you can look at in those first 2 weeks is who plays the max, who plays 7 games. There are teams that play 7 games over those first 2 weeks. Who plays the minimum, which is 5 games. And that's a 2-game difference. So with that last pick, with your early waiver wire selections, that's the sort of move you should be doing. So you should be looking at players from the Atlanta Hawks, your Ersan Ilyasovas, Johnny Collins, Dwayne Dedmons, if they don't get drafted, Kenty Bazemore, DeAndre Bembry perhaps. They play 7 games. The Nets play 7 games. The Cavs, the Mavs, the Pistons, the Warriors, the Rockets. These guys all play 7 games in that first 2-week period, the maximum games. Max week 1, max week 2. That's important. And then there are teams that aren't good. The Bulls, well, they're shit anyway, but they play 5 games over those first 2 weeks. The Heat play 5 games. The Raptors play 5 games. So looking at the end of your roster and that last pick, do you want a guy like Tyler Johnson from the Heat who he's probably going to be stretched a little bit this year for minutes. He's probably going to be pushed to get the same playing time he got last year. Is he worth a late round pick when you're not even going to get a real big initial bonus from him? Would it be better to take someone like a Kent Bazemore and get those 2 extra games and just bludgeon them with volume? Alan Crabb over a Tyler Johnson for Brooklyn. Those 2 extra games early on. that can be an important thing. With the Raptors, you've got your Norm Powell, your CJ Miles. Like, you wouldn't be picking CJ Miles that last pick. I'd still pick Norm Powell and hope that he starts to blow up. But the 5 games versus 7 games is an interesting situation. Jonas Schneider says, how should I approach a 30-team dynasty league? In what sense? What do you mean? How do you mean, how should you approach it? Head-to-head 9-cat. I'll tell you what you should try to do, if it's possible. It depends on how many active starting spots you've got. But if it's, say, like in the way that I run my 30 teams, it's like 6 starters, 7 bench guys, I would try and trade up into the middle rounds. Even if I have to, say, trade back from a second round and get myself 2 3s and 2 4s and get myself better depth in those middle rounds, that can be a decent thing in a 30-team league, because obviously depth drops off really quickly. And if you can get yourself 4 or so guys in a space of 30 picks, which is a possibility in some situations, that can be a better option. And then then if you don't have a pick in round 9 or round 10 or round 11, because you've used them as sweeteners, you trade your 2nd and your 11 and you get a 3 and a 4 back. Doesn't matter that you don't pick at 11, because in a 6-7 split, you're not going to be using your bench all that often in a league like that. So that is how it differs. But if you've got a 10 starters 3 bench, then you need to make sure you've got depth all the way through. So so that's not quite as not quite as good of an idea to do that, although it still can be achieved. But remember, when you're talking 30 teamers, it is always better to get more picks in that middle range, because there's only so many minutes to go around. There are only so many players that can get 30 minutes, and having 1 pick in each round, a player you pick in round 12 might get 12 minutes a game, but the 2 guys you get in round 4 will play 30 minutes a game, or 27 minutes a game, and it can be a big difference. So that's so Jonas says he's got 10 starters, 3 bench. So it's obviously more important to get that depth into those starters, because you are going to be rotating your bench through all the time. But you need to, if you can get some of those mid-round guys, it can be more useful in that sort of a situation. Let's get back to the schedule now, and what everyone wanted to hear about is playoffs. The part of the reason that it's hard to speak about the playoffs is I don't know when your playoffs are. It's like, again, the reason why don't you talk about points leagues? Because I don't know what your settings are. I've got no idea. Everything changes significantly. People are looking at what the default playoff weeks will be, and we can assume that, but Yahoo hasn't even opened their fantasy basketball yet, so we have absolutely no idea what their default playoff weeks are. ESPN has, and they run it through to the end of the season, which is something that I highly suggest that you don't. So your playoffs could run anywhere from week 20 through 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. It could run any of those 7 weeks, I would think. You might start it in week 20 after the All-Star break, straight after the All-Star break, and finish it in that 25th of March that I spoke about earlier. You might run it to the end of the season. You might run weeks 21 through 23. We don't know what Yahoo is going to default to. Do they do 21 to 23? Do they do 22 to 24? And it is going to differ. And obviously knowing your league settings and knowing your league schedule is going to be quite important. And knowing when those playoffs are, if you're making those decisions. Now, probably the biggest one we want to pay attention to, say, for example, you are running week 21 to 23, which, again, I hate using week numbers, so I've got to get out of that habit. Or not a habit, because I'm not even in that habit. 5th of March. Starting on the 5th of March to the week starting on the 19th of March. That is the 21st to the 23rd. In that time frame, the Minnesota Timberwolves have a 2-game week, and they play 8 games in total. So a push for Karl Anthony Towns at number 1, which I know some people are making that push. I don't think that I would pick him there. I understand the need for centers, but even before this, I don't think I would have taken him there at number 1, but he was a possibility. But that is where, when the top 8 guys are so close together, that can be a deciding factor. And you talk about the other guys who could be candidates for that number one spot. They don't have that sort of poorer schedule. The Warriors, they don't have a great one. They've got 10 games. That's okay. The Rockets, on the other hand, they have 12 games. Jim Harden, I think you'll find he is going to be a valuable player in that sort of a situation. The Oklahoma City Thunder, Russell Westbrook, what do they have? They've got 10 games in that time frame. So we're talking 2 more than Karl Anthony Towns. We've got James Harden playing 4 more games. And that is where playoff schedule can be important. Karl Anthony Towns isn't getting traded. James Harden isn't getting traded. Russell Westbrook's not getting traded. Unless they get injured, then you know they're going to be on that team. You know they're going to be performing at that level. And you know that you're going to have a 4-game disadvantage if you take Karl Anthony Towns there. And that is a real factor. But if your playoffs don't include that week that starts on the 5th of March, then you miss that 2-game weeks for the Timberwolves, and the Timberwolves then play 10 games in the next 3 weeks, from the 12th of March through to the 1st of April. They play 10 games, so it is a difference. And then that changes the discussion. In that time, the Rockets play 11. So we're talking a 1-game difference versus a 4-game difference between Towns and Harden. So that's why there's no blanket statement. And people go, playoff schedule. It depends on your playoffs. It really just does depend on how everything goes. Because you see that 1-week shift changes things significantly. It moves Towns from, 8 games. What do I do here? 12 to Harden to 11 versus 10 to okay, cool. Then I can do with that. I can deal with whatever that issue is. The Toronto Raptors, during that week 21 to 23 section, they play 12 games, 4-4-4, like the Rockets. Yeah, that's obviously very handy, but that doesn't mean that you bump Kyle Lowry up into the start of the first round. It doesn't mean that you move DeMar DeRozan into the top 30. It doesn't mean that you move Jonas Valanciunas into the top 50 or Serge Ibaka into the top 35. That's not how I'd be looking at those guys. There are a lot of things to look at here. The NBA has spaced the schedule out quite a bit, and we're seeing pretty even weeks, although, again, over those 3 weeks, there are some discrepancies. The other thing you've got to pay attention to is who is going to be out of the playoff race and who has incentive to tank. The Atlanta Hawks, they do. The Nets, no, they don't. The Bulls, yes, they do. So guys like Dwayne Wade, I think you'll see him not playing if he's even on the team by then, towards the end of the season. Zach LaVine will be missing games here and there. For the Hawks, I don't think they'll be sitting and resting Schroeder. They will when we get to April, there's no doubt. But guys like Ilyasova might start missing time. The Dallas Mavericks, will they start to tank? Yes, but it won't be Phoenix Suns like. The team that really got to worry about is Phoenix, and that is Eric Bledsoe, who's a top 25 talent, but there's a chance that he doesn't play at all in the fantasy playoffs, and that's a real pain in the ass. They could be better than expected. I would highly doubt it, but it is a possibility. But that is a significant risk with Bledsoe, and that's one of those ones where I go, you know what, that is a risk. But we've had this in the past. I'm never drafting Brook Lopez because he's going to get shut down. Never happened. That also happened 1 game. That's I guess sort of a trap that people can get into of just assuming that. And I think it's a pretty good assumption with Eric Bledsoe, but it's not a definite. Part of this ties into the fact why I like punting in head-to-head leagues as well. People will often say to me, or I'll see them write it, I never want to punt a percentage category because if I'm at a game's disadvantage, it gives me a chance to win a category. And that is true. But the reason that I am so staunchly in favor of punting is that it gives you so much strength in those categories that you're strong at that you can withstand a 4-game deficit and still win that category because you're that strong in it. You can still do that. And it's also part of the reason why in auction drafts, I'm very much against the stars and scrubs method, which if you don't know what stars and scrubs is, it's like spending $70 on Kevin Durant and $60 on Kawhi Leonard and $50 on someone else and then filling your roster in $1 players. And the reason why, how that ties into schedule, I'll get to that in a sec, but if one of those guys goes down, season's finished. What I like to do is get the bargain guys when everyone blows everything all over the high-end players and spends their, hey, look at me, I've got Durant and Kawhi, suck it, cool. When people do that and they have no money to bid on the other guys, the guys between 16 or 17 and 60 in the rankings, they all go underpriced. They all get significantly underpriced, and you can come in and just grab them all, and you can fill 11 guys on your roster with players between 17 and 60. And while that might not be as sexy and exciting, saying, you know what, my best player is... let's think of a name. My best player is Eric Bledsoe. My best player is Gordon Hayward. And you go, well, that's not exciting. What's interesting? That's not as exciting to say, I got Russell Westbrook and he got a triple-double. Suck my dick. Like, that's not as exciting for some. But I tell you why it's good, because if one of those guys goes down, you've got 9 blokes that come in at the similar level, and you can get, then it's easier to get waiver wire players to come in and reproduce that. It's also handy that when you get to the playoffs, if one of those guys gets screwed by a bad schedule, it's not your entire team. If you go stars and scrubs and grab Karl Anthony Towns and Kevin Durant as your 2 guys, and you got 18 games across that 3 weeks, you could be in a fair bit of trouble for someone who has James Harden and Chris Paul and they've got 24 games from their top 2 players. And that's still going with the stars and scrubs type of mentality. But if you know what I'm saying, like if you've got just a bunch of guys in there, you can eat like, oh, this one guy's got a bad week. That's fine. My other 9 guys who are in the same level will be able to pick up that slack, and me with some savvy waiver wire maneuvering will be able to get that done. And that's another reason why I like that. Method. Now we had another question here from Bobby. He says Orlando has the most back-to-backs. Does that make Aaron Gordon's stock go up? I don't think it changes Aaron Gordon's stock whatsoever. I just don't see how that impacts anything at all, Bobby. He's not going to be rested on back-to-back, so that doesn't impact him. If you are still watching, how would you think that makes his stock go up by having the most back-to-backs? The other thing to pay attention to is quality games. Now, the default over on Basketball Monster is 5 games, and let me explain the concept of a quality game. It's a game where you know that when you have that player, he is going to fit into your active lineup. Now, it defaults to 5. I use 8, and that means on a day in the NBA schedule when there are 8 games or less, I class that as a quality game, because if there are only 8 games on, that means there are 16 teams playing. That means that no matter who you have on your roster or who you pick up off free agency, if they play that day, you will be able to have a spot in your active lineup for them, assuming you've got the 10-3 split. If you've got a 5-5 split, it's a completely different story. And then you would drop that quality game number down to 5 or down to 4. But if you've got a standard 10-3 split, having those guys that play on the lower volume days, and it's not just Tuesdays and Thursdays, which people seem to think, oh, I'm going to need to get everyone with the Thursday games, because again, the days when you struggle, when you have a full roster, are the days when there are 11 games, when there are 12 games, when there are 10 games, when there are 13 games. Not when you have 7, not when you have 8. You can put everyone in on those days. And there are big discrepancies here. The Brooklyn Nets, for example, have 45 quality games. And the Boston Celtics have 49. And I think the 49 from the Celtics is the most. The Utah Jazz have 29. That's a big difference. So when you're looking at guys like Jingle and Joe Ingles and Rocket Rodney Hood, who might be your 11th best guy or your 12th best guy, you've got 20 less opportunities to potentially use them in your active lineup than you would, say, with Boston, with using someone like a Jay Crowder, or depending on how their lineup starts out, like a Marcus Smart. Like, you're going to be able to use Smart on at least 49 of those days if he's your 12th best player. If it's Hood for Utah and he's your 12th best player, you're probably using him 29 times. And that is a huge difference. And that is important. And looking each week at quality games and how everything plays out is important. Now, the differences aren't always that extreme. The Lakers have 48. That's another big one. The Hawks have 33. We're talking big differences here. And I reckon that's almost more significant than paying attention to the quality games, especially when you get to the end of the draft. Top of the draft, yeah, sure. The playoff schedule is important because we know what's happening with those guys. Bottom of the draft, rounds 6 through 13, I think this is more important. Can you actually use these guys? Can you actually fit them into an active lineup most of the time? And when there's such staggeringly different numbers, it can be a real difference. Now, if someone's got 49 quality games or 45, I don't really care. But when you're talking 29 to 49, that's a big eye opener, and that's a big negative towards the Utah Jazz, in my opinion. So they might play, and the Jazz play, they have 14 weeks where they play the maximum amount of games, which at a 26 it's about average. So, some teams have fewer than that. The Bucks only have 12 weeks like that. The Knicks only have 12 weeks like that. The Jazz play 14, which is second. I think the most is 15. But that's all well and good if they play max games. But these fringe back of your roster guys, they're not playing max games because you won't be able to fit them in because all their games are going to be on Wednesdays or Fridays or Saturdays. That's how it appears at the moment, and everything can change, clearly. Rocket might become sensational and become a top 50 guy, and then he's automatically in your active lineup every day, and you don't have to decide about it. But when they're fringe guys, it doesn't affect Gobert. This doesn't affect Rubio, really. But it could affect these other guys. Could affect Favors. These are important things to pay attention to. And it all goes into the whole melange of drafting, I guess. Jonas Schneider says, Embiid or Oladipo, 9-cat head-to-head. Depends, mate. It depends on your team. It depends how the draft looks. There is never what pick are you talking about? There is never a clear-cut decision on this without knowing every single part of what's happening in your league. There's just so much about it. Embiid has by far the highest ceiling, right? By far. Like he's a first-round guy. He's a top 15 player on a per-game basis. You got to be confident in what he can do injury-wise. Oladipo, he's going to be much better than last year. I'm very, very confident with that. It just depends on, again, do you need big men? What have your other picks been? Have there been any injury issues there? Are you at pick 40 and Embiid's still around? Then you pounce on it. Are you talking pick 25? Then I don't think either of them are the right guy there. So it really does depend. So that's why I'm very much against like just ranking guys or this guy or this guy. There's so much more nuance to it. If you have any other queries about the NBA schedule or anything that I've spoken about today, of course, just hit me up on Twitter at redrock_Beeble, and you can check out the schedule grid over at basketballmonster.com. You'll see a big banner across the top of the screen that says 2017-18 schedule grid. Click here, and amazingly, if you click here, it brings up the schedule grid, so you can see how everyone is playing. It tells you the quality games, and you can adjust that in settings. It tells you, it highlights in dark gray if that team is playing the maximum amount of games for that week. It's pretty easy to use, and it should be able to get a fair bit of information out of it. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Google Play, on TuneIn, on Stitcher, and on Spotify. And leave a review if you do like the show. Hey, if you don't like the show, just leave a 5-star review anyway. If you've gotten this far, I assume you enjoy something that's coming out of my mouth. And don't forget to keep checking back on Basketball Monster for our memberships to open, which won't be too far away. And another quick programming note, we'll be starting the team preview shows in the next couple of weeks, so make sure you are staying tuned for those. They'll be hopefully informative and fun as usual as I bring on the Locked On podcast hosts for those particular teams, and we talk about that team and discuss what we think is going to happen fantasy-wise and in real life, and I tend to meld and mesh all that together. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. LeBron James.